Welcome to our channel, everyone. We're thrilled you're here to experience the unfolding saga where one extraordinary human survives the lethal bite of a powerful alien huntress. At the end of our last installment, they stood side by side before the council, proving his immunity and daring to hope for a peace once thought impossible. Will these sworn enemies finally bridge the gap between their worlds, despite the ancient hatred fueling both species? To find out how their journey ends, and whether this unimaginable partnership can truly change the course of history, you'll want to listen to the entire story. Remember to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Your support helps us create more thrilling sci-fi adventures, and we love sharing these tales with all of you. Also, don't hesitate to drop a comment below about your favorite parts or any theories you have. Let us know where you're listening from. Commander Jackson Draven exhaled heavily as he scanned the horizon of Argonon, a remote and blisteringly hot planet on the frontier of human exploration. The air shimmered with waves of heat beneath twin suns that hovered ominously in the yellow-tinted sun. Every inch of Jackson's armor, forged from reinforced tungsten lacquer alloy, felt like it weighed 100 extra pounds in Argonon's dense atmosphere. Only moments before, his units had combed the area for signs of hostile life forms, but the planet's churning heat seemed determined to sap every ounce of their energy before they made contact with anyone, or anything. Lieutenant Serena Cole's voice crackled through Jackson's comlink. "Perimeter secure, Commander. No visible threats within 2 clicks, but I don't like this heat, sir. It's messing with our scanners." Jackson recognized the concern layered in her voice. Serena was a meticulous soldier, keenly aware of anything that might compromise their technology. He adjusted his grip on the plasma rifle he carried, feeling a rivulet of sweat slide down the side of his face. "We'll have to rely on our eyes for now," Jackson replied, scanning the surroundings with sharp vigilance. A pale copper mountain range, Mount Virath, rose against the sky like gigantic fangs. The rock formations appeared to gleam under the fierce sunlight, giving the impression of a molten sculpture that had cooled into a jagged, forbidding outline. Despite the scenic wonder, he knew that deep within that copper sheen might lurk the Virathians, an elusive and predatory alien species that his squad had been sent to confront. In the near distance, Sergeant Travis O'Neill quietly noted readings on a handheld device. "Movement, northeast quadrant. Fast-moving single life form," he announced, scanning the horizon. Tension immediately gripped them. Jackson raised a hand, silently ordering his small squad to hold their positions. Their mission was to perform reconnaissance and evaluate the threat levels in this sector. Diplomatic relations between Earth's coalition and the Virathians had all but collapsed. Reports of Virathian expansion had become an urgent concern, particularly after rumors of their forward outposts encroaching on newly established human colonies. "Maintain visual, but do not engage," Jackson commanded. His voice, though quiet, carried an edge of authority. Even the slightest tremor revealed a pulse of excitement that he couldn't fully suppress. He peered into the haze, aware that Virathians were famed for their uncanny stealth, biological traits that allowed them to move as ghosts across even the harshest terrains. A flicker in the purple-hued undergrowth made his heart lurch. One moment there was nothing but shimmering foliage. The next, a figure emerged, moving with predatory elegance. It was a Virathian female, taller than he'd expected, with metallic gold skin that seemed to glow in Argonon's fierce daylight. Her hair, a shade of obsidian streaked with silver, whipped around her face, and her dark, near-black eyes reflected a feral intensity. Clad in a sleek combination of woven plating and scaled armor, she exuded an air of lethal grace. Jackson raised his rifle, though he kept his finger off the trigger. Up close, he realized precisely why the Virathians were so feared. Their pronounced fangs, lethal claws, and heightened sensory awareness ranked them among the galaxy's most formidable apex predators. As she glided forward, her movements barely rustled the vegetation around her. Every muscle in Jackson's body prepared for confrontation, though he maintained enough discipline not to fire first. The moment the Virathian woman's gaze locked onto Jackson, the latent hostility in her posture ignited into full-blown aggression. She hissed words in her native language, harsh, raspy syllables that his translator struggled to parse. Although incomplete, the device gave enough meaning to convey her scorn. Human trespassers were as good as dead on this sacred soil. Beneath that scorn lay something else, an undercurrent of raw intensity, reflecting both fury and a strange curiosity. about the intruders before her. Her name, the translator eventually managed to indicate, was Zarya, a Varathian who appeared to be in the prime of her life cycle. Jackson sensed more than the translator conveyed. Zarya's glare was a blatant challenge. Her people's well-documented xenophobia toward humans, particularly in contested space, had shaped her every movement. One step forward, and she might decide that parley was pointless. "Hold fire," Jackson murmured into the comm. Serena and Travis, crouching in the cover of thick purple leaves, exchanged uneasy glances. The commander took a purposeful step toward the alien, holding his plasma rifle in plain view but angled down. "We don't want conflict," he said, his voice carrying across the silent clearing. "We've come to conduct reconnaissance, not pick a fight." Zarya's response was immediate. She tensed, hissing in Varathian, her claws scraping the air as though testing the possibility of an attack. A moment later, she lunged toward Jackson with startling speed. He barely had time to pivot, let alone raise his rifle, before she reached him. Her hands collided with his chest armor, and despite the advanced shock absorption built into the tungsten lacquer plating, the blow rattled him. Serena's voice rang in his helmet. "Commander?" But Jackson had no time to reassure her. Within seconds, he was engaged in a desperate grappling match, every servo in his armor assisting to keep the Varathian's lethal claws away from the vulnerable seals around his neck and torso. Zarya moved with a fluid combination of strength and agility, so fast that Jackson's enhanced reflexes only just prevented her from landing decisive blows. In a blur, she twisted from his grip, her fang-lined mouth aiming for the gap near his collar where the suit met his body. No matter how advanced the armor, a well-placed bite from a Varathian was considered catastrophic. Their venom could paralyze and kill in under a minute. It was the prime reason entire squads had been lost before they could even radio for extraction. As Zarya sank her fangs into the junction of Jackson's neck and shoulder, the unmistakable burning shock of pain shot through him. He felt the pressure, the piercing of flesh, and a wave of heat from the venom's entry point. Instinct told him to expect his limbs to weaken, his mind to blur, his lungs to seize from the neurotoxin. Death would arrive in moments. Yet the anticipated doom never came. Instead, a peculiar tingling replaced the burn. Jackson felt a surge of adrenaline, but nothing more. He was not losing consciousness, not going stiff with paralysis. Blinking in confusion, he pushed Zarya away with a grunt, reaching to inspect the wound, fully expecting to find his life draining away. A tense silence blanketed the area, broken only by Jackson's labored breathing. Zarya stumbled back, shock contorting her features. She stared at the bite mark, the bright drops of his blood gleaming on her pale lips. It was as if she couldn't comprehend why he was still standing. Her eyes flicked from his wound to his face, trying to decipher the impossible. Serena and Travis rushed forward, weapons raised, prepared to unload a hailstorm of plasma if the alien moved to strike again. Jackson signaled them to stand down. His head was still spinning, and his muscles felt a trace of residual tremor, but he was undeniably alive and functional. Checking the bio readouts on his wrist as he found his vitals stable, there was no sign of venom-induced paralysis or system shutdown. Zarya's lips curled in what looked like disbelief. She spat out words that the translator half fumbled into broken standard. "You should die. Why still live?" It was a question Jackson didn't have a proper answer to. Earth's best scientists had studied Varathian venom for years. The data was unequivocal. Any dose sufficient to break the skin had a near-certain mortality rate in humans. No known antidote could save a soldier once bitten. And yet, here stood Jackson, upright and perplexed rather than incapacitated. Cautiously, he pressed a hand to the wound, finding 2 small punctures, but no continuous bleeding. The pain was tolerable, and he felt none of the numbness or creeping paralysis typically described in mission logs about Varathian encounters. "I really don't know," he admitted, inhaling shakily, "but it seems I'm not as easy to kill as you'd hoped." Zarya bared her fangs, unsure whether to see him as an aberration or a threat that demanded redefinition. Over the translator's halting attempts, she growled, "No human resists venom." "You different?" Jackson thought back to the rumors regarding advanced genetic augmentations employed after disastrous campaigns, specifically the hush-hush operations the Earth Coalition financed. Could there be a link between that hush-hush science and his baffling resilience to Varathian venom? He had undergone an experimental therapy once, after an explosion nearly took his life on the frontier colony of Isilon. Officially, the doctors told him it was accelerated tissue regeneration, but he had occasionally wondered if more had been done to him than stated. I guess so, he said quietly. Look, we're not here to escalate hostilities. If you speak for the Varathians, let's talk. Zarya's eyes flickered with wariness and perhaps a glimmer of curiosity. She glanced at Serena and Travis, reading the tension in their stances. Clearly outnumbered, she backed away, tensing her shoulders as if ready to spring at any instant. Yet she didn't lunge again. I am Zarya, the translator hissed. First huntress, a Varathian vanguard. Her speech was still awkward, revealing that her translator tech was also catching up to the heated moment. We do not negotiate with colonizing humans. Serena bristled at the remark. Colonizing? We have no settlements here. Argonon is as close to neutral territory as can be. Zarya scowled, her tone acrid. You come with weapons, you scout, you dig. Humans always taking. As she spoke, her gaze never left Jackson's wound. A swirl of suspicion and reluctant respect crossed her features, as though the very act of him continuing to stand challenged everything she believed about human vulnerability. Commander Jackson found himself at a crossroads. Instinct and training screamed for him to detain Zarya. Yet he saw a flicker of potential in this unexpected stalemate. Clearly, his immunity to Varathian venom was as startling to her as it was to him. That revelation had, for the moment, disrupted her urge to kill. Maybe it was an opening for dialogue. He lowered his plasma rifle slowly, letting the muzzle aim at the ground. We don't want war, he reiterated, voice calmer. We are here because your people have expanded into our recognized sector. That threatens our colonies, yes, but if there's a diplomatic path, let's find it. Zarya's laugh was sharp, nearly mocking. Diplomacy? Varathians see only strength. You humans talk while building armies. I do not believe your words. Serena was about to retort, but Jackson stopped her with a subtle motion of his hand. He couldn't blame Zarya for her skepticism. Centuries of conflict between humans and Varathians had cultivated mutual distrust. The fact that her venom had failed to kill him might be the only threat of interest preventing her from launching another attack. Maybe I can prove we aren't just out here to slaughter your people, Jackson suggested, noticing the twitch of Zarya's claw-tipped fingers. You said you're a first huntress, right? That must mean you hold some authority among the Varathians. Zarya angled her head, her posture both predatory and curious. I lead scouting and hunting missions. I face threats to Varathian sovereignty. My council has weight in decisions about how to deal with intruders. So, take me to your leadership. Jackson's words came out bold, and he could practically feel Serena's alarmed reaction behind him. Let them see this anomaly for themselves. My survival might be enough to give us a chance to talk. A swirl of conflicting emotions played across Zarya's face. The translator sputtered half-processed phrases, but the core feeling came across. Confusion, suspicion, and beneath it, a reluctant acknowledgement that his immunity to her venom was unprecedented. You invite yourself into Varathian territory, Zarya eventually said. That is dangerous, foolish. More might try to kill you. Jackson gave a wry smirk. If they bite me, we'll learn the same lesson, won't we? He recognized the risk in this proposition. Heading deeper into Varathian territory, possibly alone if that's what it took, might be considered a death wish by most. But the seeds of a potential breakthrough were here, and the Earth Coalition had long sought a diplomatic angle to end or at least temper the Varathian skirmishes. Sergeant O'Neill stepped closer, shifting uncomfortably. Commander, you know we can't just let you waltz off without support, especially not with her. Zarya hissed in annoyance at O'Neill's skepticism, but Jackson spoke quickly. The longer we remain at a standoff, the more likely we'll spiral into hostilities. Our orders are to investigate, gather intel, and if possible, de-escalate the conflict. This might be the only chance we get, Serena interjected, careful to keep her voice low. And what if it's an ambush, Commander? It might be, he conceded, scanning Zarya's expression for any hint of treachery. But I don't think so. In truth, he was guided by a strange gut instinct, the same primal sense that had helped him survive numerous close calls. Zarya's eyes betrayed curiosity that outmatched her hatred, and the memory of her abrupt cessation of attack after her bite failed loomed large. After a few tense moments, Jackson asked Serena and Travis to pull back, set up a perimeter that guaranteed a safe extraction route if needed, and wait for further instructions. The rest of the squad waited beyond the ridge with a transport vehicle ready. If Zarya insisted he come alone, so be it. That was a risk he was prepared to accept. Zarya remained silent during these arrangements, occasionally scanning the horizon as though expecting more humans to emerge at any second. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured. Your companions can follow at distance, but if they draw weapons on my people, there will be no mercy. Jackson nodded. Understood. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. He tore open a small medical pack and applied disinfectant to the bites on his neck, an automatic reflex even though it seemed the venom was no danger to him. The translator picked up Zarya's curt observation. You bleed. You do not fear the mark of a Varathian. There's a difference between caution and fear, Jackson replied, tossing the spent medical wipe aside. And right now, I'm more curious than frightened. She studied him, her gaze fierce. Curiosity is rare in this situation, she said at last, the translator stuttering to accommodate her abrupt shift in topics. Most humans who meet a Varathian fang do not live to speak of it. I should be furious. My advantage was stolen when my venom failed. Yet, her voice trailed off. A short hush enveloped them. The twin suns had begun their slow descent, painting the sky with swirling oranges and reds. Each color seemed to reflect off her golden skin, accentuating her exotic, almost regal bearing. He couldn't decide if the glint in her eyes was residual animosity, fascination, or both. Jackson recognized a pattern typical in apex predators who encountered something they couldn't immediately kill or comprehend. A recalibration of instincts, a redefinition of the threat, or perhaps a new category altogether. Lead the way, he said, breaking the silence. He gestured in the direction she had originally appeared from, guessing that was where Varathian lines were. Zarya dipped her head in a curt nod. The swirling, scaled armor plates that covered her shoulders rattled lightly as she pivoted and stalked into the dense, purple vegetation. Jackson followed, rifle at the ready but pointed down, aware that this journey might represent both his best chance at forging peace and a personal step into the unknown. As they traveled deeper into Varathian territory, the topography changed. The rich, purple foliage gave way to groves of silver-blue flora whose leaves produced a faint chiming sound in the breeze. The sensation was surreal, like stepping into a world layered with living music. Occasionally, he caught glimpses of four-legged creatures bounding away from them, each sporting a mane of shimmering quills that caught the fading sunlight like prisms. Zarya walked quietly, but Jackson noticed her glancing back at him with increasing frequency. Once he asked, You all right? More to break the tension than anything else. She responded with a soft hiss. Ascension draws near, she muttered, as if expecting him to understand the significance. The translator provided no context, but the word ascension carried a certain weight. An hour into their march, the air began to cool as dusk settled. The sky overhead glittered with unfamiliar constellations, each star flickering in slightly different hues, reflecting Argonon's dense atmosphere. Zarya called a brief halt, selecting a small clearing beside a cluster of tall, spiraling plants whose leaves glowed with bioluminescent pulses. Night on Argonon can be hazardous, predators follow us, and I prefer not to meet them without vantage, she explained. Though she spoke matter-of-factly, Jackson caught a trace of strain in her voice. He activated a small field lamp, bathing the area in a soft white glow. Serena's voice crackled through the calm, confirming they were monitoring from a distance. No immediate threats were visible, besides the occasional flicker of movement on the perimeter. All's quiet, Commander, but stay alert, she warned. Nodding, Jackson turned to see Zarya leaning against one of the glowing plants, arms folded across her chest. She looked exhausted, yet still exuded an aura of restless energy. Remembering her mention of ascension, he felt compelled to ask, You said something earlier about ascension drawing near. What does that mean for you? She eyed him warily before responding. Ascension is our cyclical, biological phase, a time when aggression, strength, and certain drives intensify. Her jaws flexed, revealing fangs that had already proven deadly to so many. It is both a blessing and a curse, an increased capacity for battle, but also an overwhelming primal urge. Jackson studied her, piecing details together. If she was entering a heightened state of aggression and other impulses, that might explain her initial hostility, but it only spurred more questions. Is that what caused you to attack so quickly? Zarya's lips curved into something between a sneer and a guilty smirk. Partly. We Varathians don't suffer intruders lightly even in calm times. But during ascension, the smallest provocation can lead to lethal outcomes. Then her gaze shifted pointedly to his neck wound, the twin punctures that had almost meant his doom. None of that, however, explains why you still stand after my bite. Maybe we'll find out, Jackson replied, a slight edge of humor in his tone despite their grim circumstances. For now, though, if this ascension intensifies further, should I be worried about another attempt on my life? She considered him for a moment, eyes narrowing. Worried, perhaps, but your resilience intrigues me. If I kill you, I learn nothing. And the more this ascension pulls at my body, the more I... She stopped, seemingly unsettled by her own admission. The translator garbled some residual words, picking out phrases like conflict of desire and unprecedented curiosity. Jackson's heart thumped. Something about her unwavering gaze, combined with the remark about drives intensifying, sent a buzz of tension through him that was more than just fear. If Varathians recognized any primal attraction, it was typically overshadowed by their lethal instincts. Yet here she was, standing at a precipice, uncertain. Night deepened, and the swirling plants provided enough luminance to outline their surroundings. Jackson checked in with Serena once more. She confirmed everything was still clear. They would maintain a rotating watch, ensuring no Varathian patrols or wild creatures ambushed them under cover of darkness. Meanwhile, Zarya seemed restless. She paced around the clearing, occasionally closing her eyes as if grappling with something inside her. Ascension drives, like hunger, but not just for flesh, she finally said, turning to Jackson. The translator inflected her words with awkward syntax, but the primal meaning shone through. It's a hunt of a different kind. Jackson swallowed, stepping closer. He recognized that her voice had dropped, a huskiness that was almost human in its suggestion of desire. He recalled the mission files on Varathians, mentioning that in addition to their lethal biting attacks, they went through cycles that increased fertility and aggression. Humans who encountered Varathians in these cycles rarely survived if conflict arose, so data was sparse. He watched her carefully, mindful of the tension crackling in the air. The heat of the planet seemed to intensify again, or maybe that was just his perception. Zarya's gaze fixated on him, curious yet guarded, as though trying to reconcile a centuries-old hostility with an inexplicable draw to this human who should have died under her fangs. Ascension might be fueling aggression and other impulses, he said softly. But you still have a choice, Zarya. She hissed softly at the mention of her name, a blend of challenge and acknowledgement. Always a choice, she replied. But we do not resist nature as your species does. We embrace what is in our blood. Her words pressed on a nerve. Humans prided themselves on civilization, on channeling instincts into structured societies. Varathians, by contrast, had an older, more primal approach. Still, there was no denying that her bite had undone some crucial assumptions on both sides. Maybe that was what destiny looked like, a chance to break old cycles. Suddenly, something in the undergrowth caught her attention. Zarya stiffened, motioning for Jackson to silence. He flicked off his field lamp. In the gloom, the swirling, luminous leaves cast shifting shadows. Then he heard it, a chittering sound from beyond the clearing. Carefully, he lowered himself to a crouch, weapon angled. From the corner of his eye, he saw a shape slink through the brush, elongated limbs and multiple glowing eyes scanning for prey. Jackson's neural HUD identified it as an organic stalker, a large predator known to roam these parts during nightfall. Typically solitary, they were extremely territorial. If it attacked, it could be as deadly as a Varathian. Zarya tensed, lips curling back. We kill it or it kills us, she whispered. The organic stalker prowled closer, revealing a slick carapace mottled with violet and black, two sets of legs that ended in razor-like talons, and a set of twitching mandibles that gleamed under the bioluminescent glow. It was larger than Jackson expected, likely outweighing him by several hundred pounds. In the hush, he could almost hear its quickening breath, the predator's version of excitement. Zarya glanced at Jackson, silently signaling a plan. Her tail, partially coiled, indicated she might circle around to flank the creature. Jackson gave a subtle nod. Carefully, he shifted positions, trying not to give away their intent. Serena's frantic whisper came through his comm. "Commander, we have a visual on a local predator near your position. Need backup?" He murmured back, "Stand by. Might be too late to avoid confrontation." The stalker made the first move. Its talons scraped across rocky ground as it launched forward with terrifying speed. Zarya reacted in a blur, pivoting her body and slashing out with her claws. She raked a deep gash in its flank, eliciting a shrill screech that echoed through the clearing. The beast responded by snapping its mandibles, nearly catching her arm. Jackson seized the opening. He raised his plasma rifle, aiming at a cluster of sensory organs near the creature's head. One shot crackled through the night, sizzling as it struck the stalker. It roared in pain, rearing back for a second. Zarya wasted no time. With a ferocious leap, she dug her claws into the creature's carapace and delivered a powerful bite to its neck region. Even in her partially controlled state, her lethal instincts were undeniable. The stalker thrashed, but the combination of plasma burn and Varathian bite overwhelmed it. Soon it collapsed in a trembling heap. Zarya panted heavily, stepping away from the carcass with blood dripping from her fangs. Jackson kept his weapon aimed until he was sure it was finished. Serena radioed, "Status?" "Hostile neutralized," Jackson replied, heart hammering. He cut the transmission short, returning his focus to Zarya. She moved unsteadily, her breathing ragged. He realized that the rush of adrenaline, combined with her ascension state, must be clamoring inside her. Cautiously, he approached. The glow from the leaves illuminated her face. He could see the conflict in her eyes. Triumph from the kill, swirling instincts demanding more, and an underlying exhaustion from the day's events. Some of the stalker's blood flecked her lips, accentuating her predatory aspect, and yet his earlier sense of fear was not the only response stirring within him. "Zarya," he said softly, offering a canteen of purified water. Her eyes flicked to his, bright with lingering ferocity. For a tense moment, he wondered if she'd turn that lethal impulse back on him. But slowly she reached out and took the canteen. The translator was silent, perhaps overwhelmed by the flurry of mental instructions required to parse her speech. Finally, she managed in halting standard, "You fight well for a human. Efficient. We kill together." The uneasy truce between them solidified in that moment. Jackson felt a surge of relief that the lethal synergy they'd just displayed could, in a broader sense, foreshadow how their species might coexist rather than clash. Amid Argonon's swirling leaves, they shared a fleeting sense of victory and an awareness of each other that was impossible to ignore. Without further words, they dragged the stalker's carcass away from the clearing to deter scavengers, then returned to their makeshift camp. While Zarya prowled the perimeter, Jackson rechecked his protective gear and made notes on a datapad about the encounter. Several times he glanced her way, a complicated knot of respect, caution, and something else twisting in his gut. As the night grew still, Zarya finally settled near the glow of the swirling plants. Jackson came closer, stopping a few steps away. The tension between them remained, but it had shifted. Instead of mortal hostility, it felt more like a precarious tether. He crouched. "You saved my life," he said. It was true. If she hadn't intervened, the stalker could have torn into him during its final surge. She angled her head, fangs catching the dim light. "You shot first," she countered. "We fought as pack." The translator fumbled, but managed to convey her meaning. A sense of camaraderie, alien as it was, hovered in the air. Jackson exhaled. "We have a common enemy in Argonon's wildlife, it seems." Zarya huffed a soft laugh, an almost melodic sound. A silence stretched. Finally she spoke, voice quieter than before. "I feel ascension burning hotter. Typically I channel it into hunts, challenges, seeking a strong mate for the cycle. My mind fights it, but the body hungers. Varathians do not view such drives as taboo." The directness of her confession struck Jackson like a physical blow. He was used to human social norms, where attraction, especially among strangers, developed with more subtlety. His heart rate spiked as she rose and stepped closer, her gold-hued skin glowing in the plant light. He forced himself to remember that beneath this tension, she was a trained warrior who could rip his throat out if the mood turned. "I didn't expect you to say that," he replied cautiously. Zarya's eyes were full of a primal intensity that seemed to wage a secret war within her. You do not fear me as you should, and your blood resists my fang. I cannot interpret the meaning. My instincts demand I test you further, but reason says you could be a gateway to understanding these humans. His mind reeled. What was he supposed to do? A day ago, he couldn't have imagined even surviving a Varathian's bite, let alone standing on a deserted planet, heart hammering with conflicting desires in the presence of one. He swallowed, stepping nearer. We might forge something different, you and I, something neither of our peoples ever considered possible. His statement lingered like a challenge, as though naming the spark between them granted it reality. Zarya's nostrils flared, her body taut. She reached out, resting clawed fingers against the fabric of his undersuit. He fought the impulse to recoil, conscious that, though her venom appeared harmless to him, her raw strength could still break bones. You speak strange words, but they stir my curiosity, she whispered, voice thick with whatever impulses her ascension churned up. Her claws retracted slightly, turning the touch gentler, more akin to a deliberate exploration. Jackson felt heat ripple through him, and not just from Argonon's climate. The irony that he'd arrived here as a soldier, with instructions to stand ready for lethal action against Varathians, was not lost on him. Now he stood at the precipice of something profoundly intimate with one of their fiercest warriors. He let himself rest a hand against her forearm, feeling the ridged texture of her armor and the warmth of her skin beneath. His voice dropped to a murmur. This might go against every protocol or expectation, but it's our moment to define. The translator was unhelpful in capturing the nuance of his words, but Zarya's eyes flashed with comprehension. She leaned in, fangs parted slightly. Jackson's pulse thundered. He half expected searing pain. Instead, her lips brushed his, parted with a cautious deliberateness. Their kiss carried the taste of raw, metallic tang, likely residual from the battle, but it also carried a startling rush of electricity. He thought fleetingly of Serena and Travis watching from the perimeter. If they saw this, it'd be an absolute shock. But that concern was lost in the rising wave of sensation. Zarya's breath came quicker, her body pressing into his. He marveled at how easily he held her without succumbing to fear, adrenaline swirling with desire. Yet as fast as it began, Zarya pulled away, inhaling sharply. She trembled, tension coiling in her shoulders. Ascension does not wait. It demands completion, she said, the translator catching the gist of her frustration. But I cannot simply stay here. My duty remains to bring you before the Varathian Council if we are to avoid war. Though a part of him felt a surge of longing, Jackson nodded. I won't stand in your way. My own people need answers as well. They'll be suspicious, but if we can reach some kind of diplomatic corridor, it might stop bloodshed before it escalates. Tomorrow, Zarya said firmly, we push forward at dawn. My people must witness your immunity. We must see what it means for Varathian sovereignty. If you survive their trials, perhaps real negotiations can begin. Jackson exhaled slowly, nodding. The notion of Varathian trials was ominous, but after everything he'd endured so far, turning back felt cowardly. In the quiet that followed, he recalled the 4 strong reasons he was doing this: forging peace, exploring the unknown, honoring his oath as a soldier, and oddly enough, the personal bond blossoming between him and Zarya. Each of those reasons formed a pillar of conviction that kept him from crumbling under the gravity of what lay ahead. Morning arrived in a blaze of crimson light from Argonon's twin suns, painting the sky like a celestial tapestry. Jackson awoke feeling the subtle ache of yesterday's exertions, but also a strange anticipation. Zarya stirred nearby, her lean silhouette highlighted by the rising dawn. The lethal gleam of her fangs and the perfect coiling of her sinewy muscles were reminders of the peril entrusting her. Yet there she stood, a living contradiction, a killer, a potential lover, and a key to an uncharted alliance. He quickly checked in with Serena and Travis, who reported no hostile movement overnight. They'd slept in shifts, ensuring the rest of the squad remained at a safe vantage. You ready for this, Commander? Serena asked, her tone brimming with concern. As ready as I can be, Jackson answered. Keep your distance, but remain alert. If the Varathians decide to turn this into an ambush, I'll need you. And what if they don't? Travis inquired. What if this is actually the start of something we've all hoped for but never believed possible? Jackson allowed himself a faint smile. Then maybe we witness history in the making. As Zarya led him away from the clearing, they fell into a measured pace. The day's travel took them toward Mount Varath's copper slopes, weaving through valleys brimming with large, spore-bearing plants that released shimmering pollen into the air. Zarya explained in clipped phrases that these fertile valleys were once considered sacred Varathian grounds, teeming with the energy that fed their species' life cycles. It made sense that the Varathians would be furious about any human incursion, given the land's significance. Where the pollen thickened, Jackson noticed a mild sting in his eyes, but Zarya seemed energized by it. Ascension, he remembered. She was likely nearing the peak of her cycle. He kept an eye on her for any sudden changes in mood or aggression, but found her more contemplative than combative, as if the prior night's event had established an unspoken agreement between them. Eventually, they reached a winding pass that opened into a network of sandstone arches. The stone glowed under the midday light, giving the passage an ethereal, almost ceremonial appearance. Zarya paused at an archway inscribed with Varathian symbols. Beyond this, we enter Kairakar province, stronghold of the Varathian vanguard, she explained. They will sense us the moment we cross. Jackson exhaled, his heart pounding with the awareness of stepping into enemy territory, but he squared his shoulders. Then let them sense we come in peace. Zarya gave a reluctant nod, scanning the ridge. She must have spotted something because a low growl vibrated from her throat. Moments later, figures emerged, each bearing the distinct golden hue and formidable posture of Varathian warriors. They stood along the rocky outcroppings, brandishing energy spears and curved blades. The moment Zarya and Jackson passed beneath the archway, the Varathians dropped down, forming a half-circle to block further advance. One step forward, a male with silver-streaked hair and a broad chest. His posture radiated authority. Jackson guessed he might be a commander of some sort. Zarya, he greeted, voice resonating with challenge. You return from the frontier with a human in your shadow. Explain. Zarya lifted her chin, posture unwavering. He is Commander Jackson Draven. He survived my bite. Our venom did not kill him. A murmur of shock rippled through the assembled warriors. Jackson steeled himself, imagining how swiftly they could tear him apart if they decided this was a trick. Then the older warrior barked a mocking laugh. Impossible. Humans die like any lesser prey. Show me proof. The demand hung in the air. Jackson could almost feel Zarya's tension at the insinuation. She didn't hesitate. Quick as lightning, she turned and bared her fangs, aiming to repeat the very test that had happened before. Jackson braced, mind shrieking that this was insane to let her bite him again. But the truth was, he had no better plan. If they wanted a demonstration, he'd provide one, praying that his mysterious immunity would hold. She struck, her fangs sinking into the same spot on his shoulder as before. Pain coursed through him, sharper this time because he wasn't startled. He clenched his jaw, focusing on controlling his breathing. A wave of vertigo threatened to surface, but it receded quickly, replaced by that familiar tingling sensation. His blood pounded, but he remained upright. Gasps came from the circle of Varathian warriors. Zarya withdrew her fangs, stepping back to observe him. Jackson stared defiantly into the eyes of the silver-haired male. Satisfied, he managed, voice tight with the lingering sting. The male advanced, lifting one arm as though to seize Jackson's wounded shoulder. Zarya intervened with a hiss. He is under my protection. Another bite will not be tolerated. If you doubt, test him with scanning instruments, not by repeated assault. The older warrior's eyes flicked between them. You speak as though he is your bond? Zarya didn't answer outright, but her unwavering stance spoke volumes. For a moment, Jackson was struck by how fiercely she shielded him, a turn of events he would have deemed impossible mere days ago. Slowly, the older male's demeanor shifted from haughty disbelief to a grudging acceptance that an anomaly stood before him. Very well, he said. You will come to the Citadel. The Council must see this with their own eyes. We will escort you. Stepping back, he gave a short command in Varathian to the others, and they parted. Jackson felt a twinge of relief that he and Zarya wouldn't be ripped apart on the spot. He tapped his comm, instructing Serena and Travis to stay put while he proceeded. He'd update them as soon as possible. They indicated that the rest of his squad was on standby. The walk to the Citadel was punctuated by exclamations from passing Varathians who stared at the sight of a human walking unscathed after being bitten. Word spread fast, and by the time they climbed a set of colossal steps leading into the heart of a fortress-like structure, a crowd had begun to gather. The fortress walls were carved with spiraling reliefs depicting Varathian hunts, epic battles, and cycles of life that Jackson could only guess were tied to their ascension rituals. At last, they were ushered into a grand hall lined with shimmering banners. At the far end, seated on a dais, were members of the Varathian Council. Jackson's breath caught at the magnificence of their appearance. Each wore ceremonial attire woven from metallic threads, their skin painted with intricate symbols that seemed alive under the radiant interior lights. A hush fell as Zarya led him forward. An older female Varathian, presumably the High Counselor by the elaborate markings on her arms, leaned forward. "We have heard unbelievable news. A human stands here immune to our venom? We would see proof." Zarya's voice rang out, both proud and cautious. "High Counselor Varix, I have already demonstrated the proof. My bite, witnessed by many. He yet lives." A council member with dark silver tattoos across his collarbones snorted. Could it be a trick? An engineered device protecting him? Jackson felt the weight of a dozen scrutinizing gazes. "Scan me," he suggested, gesturing openly. "I have no devices except basic translator tech and a standard tactical undersuit. Whatever allows me to survive your venom is in my body, not strapped to it." So began an intense series of scans, performed with a handheld Varathian analyzer that beeped and pulsed along his skin. The council members conferred in hushed tones, exchanging data. When they finished, the High Counselor wore an expression torn between fascination and concern. "The toxins do circulate in him, yet his cells are unresponsive to their paralyzing effect. Intriguing, perhaps dangerous." Here Jackson saw his chance. It doesn't have to be dangerous. This immunity could be a bridge. Our species has been locked in conflict for generations. But if we can't hurt each other so easily, maybe there's a reason to talk. Zarya stood beside him, clasping her hands behind her back. "I vouch for his honorable conduct. He fights valiantly, and he seeks dialogue, not invasion." Silence settled. The council's combined gaze left Jackson unsettled, but resolved. He knew that forging peace wouldn't be simple, yet the existence of even a single human who survived Varathian venom challenged ancient assumptions on both sides. If that challenge was enough to force them into meaningful negotiation, then risking his life had been worthwhile. The High Counselor rose from her seat. "We will deliberate. You shall remain here under observation. If your words ring true, we may reconsider the directive to eradicate all human outposts near our territory. If they ring false..." She didn't finish her sentence, letting the threat hang palpably. As guards stepped forward to escort Jackson and Zarya away, he felt a spark of cautious hope. He glanced at Zarya, whose eyes locked onto his, and in that fierce, determined exchange, he sensed the forging of something that transcended biology or politics. A bond between the unlikeliest of allies, one that could ripple across star systems and rewrite the narrative of a centuries-old war. They had faced her lethal bite, and it had failed to kill him. Now, together they faced an even greater challenge, convincing the galaxy that two sworn adversaries might yet find unity in a future shaped by discovery, cooperation, and an alien spark of love. If her bite was fatal to any species except him, then perhaps that miraculous exception could illuminate a new path for them all. As dawn broke over the gleaming spires of the Citadel, Zarya and Commander Jackson Draven stood together, a silent challenge to centuries of conflict. Although most Varathians regarded humans with deep hostility, the High Council's reluctant acceptance of Jackson's immunity had sparked a flicker of intrigue among the population. Whispers of a possible alliance slipped through the corridors like delicate echoes of hope. Determined to protect this fragile truce, Jackson and Zarya set out on a careful journey across the Varathian strongholds, where skeptical warlords and fearful citizens alike tested the boundaries of his survival. Each new encounter forced Zarya to defend not only Jackson's worth, but also her own decision to spare him. Despite danger lurking at every turn, a shared purpose bound them tighter than any treaty could. Stepping beyond old grudges, they began to rewrite what it truly meant for human and Varathian destinies to intertwine.